I still remember the first time I noticed him. My husband's younger brother. It was subtle, nothing immediate, just a glance that lingered a second too long, a smile that seemed to know things I hadn't said aloud, and the way his eyes followed me across the room like he was cataloging every small detail about me. At first, I tried to brush it off, convince myself that I was imagining things. I had married his older brother, after all, a man I respected, loved in my own quiet way, but one who somehow had this ineffable distance about him, especially at night. It wasn't that he didn't care. It was that his timing, his rhythm, the way he went about intimate moments was brief, almost mechanical, a sort of check-the-box scenario that left me craving more, craving connection, craving attention that wasn't just functional. And Ratan, that was his name, somehow seemed to sense what I needed without me ever saying it. The tension between us began slowly, imperceptibly. At first, it was just small gestures, lingering hands on the door frame when he passed by, brushing against my arm with an almost casual familiarity, or sitting just a little too close when we were all in the living room. But over time, I realized these weren't accidents. He was testing me, probing me, seeing how far he could go without being obvious. I found myself anticipating these moments, looking forward to the sound of his knock on the door when my husband was at the office, my pulse quickening, my mind racing with excitement and guilt all at once. Sometimes I'd hear him in the hallway before he even knocked, and my body would respond before my brain could intervene. It was thrilling and terrifying, the kind of secret longing that makes your chest tighten and your thoughts spiral in ways you can't control. I kept a careful mental tally of every visit, every shared glance, every fleeting brush of fingers, as though documenting some forbidden research on human desire. And he, with his easy grin and mischievous eyes, seemed equally invested, equally aware of the danger we were courting. We had this unspoken understanding, a silent choreography we followed when my husband was away. Ratan would appear in my room under the pretext of something mundane, needing a charger, asking a question about a shared household task, or simply wanting to check in on me. And I would respond with the same mix of caution and anticipation, careful to maintain the illusion of innocence while my mind raced with fantasies of what could be if circumstances were different. Each visit left me flushed, exhilarated, and guilty. The guilty pleasure of knowing that this secret attraction was alive and reciprocated, vibrating in the small, charged space between us. It was addictive. I'd catch myself replaying moments long after they ended, wondering if the curve of his smile had been intentional, if the brush of his hand had been a test, if the look in his eyes was as loaded as I felt it. And I realized I wasn't just noticing him. I was memorizing him. Every movement, every word, every subtle shift in expression stored in my mind like a precious, dangerous treasure I couldn't share with anyone, least of all my husband. Speaking of him, the contrast was stark. My husband, though kind and steady in many ways, struggled to satisfy me in ways I craved at night. His timing was short, hurried, almost perfunctory, leaving me restless, unsatisfied, and achingly aware of the gap between duty and desire. Ratan, in contrast, was patient, attentive, playful, and somehow just being near him felt like an illicit indulgence I couldn't resist. The secret thrill of it all made my days and nights shimmer with a tension I had never known before marriage, and I knew I was treading dangerous ground. There were mornings when my husband would leave for work, early and unsuspecting, and almost immediately after, Ratan would appear at my door. Sometimes he'd claim it was about something practical, like a question about groceries or a family matter, but I knew the truth. It was the closeness, the stolen moments, the thrill of danger that drew him as much as it drew me. And I would respond with the same mix of teasing, shyness, and longing, carefully calibrating my words, my glances, my gestures, to convey curiosity without fully revealing the depth of my desire. There were times he would linger, leaning against the doorway, watching me as I moved around the room, as I made tea, as I absent-mindedly checked my phone, and I felt a heat rise in me that I couldn't explain. The tension was palpable. It was a conversation in silence, a dance of small movements and loaded glances that left my mind reeling long after he had gone. And somehow we both understood that we were playing with fire, that every visit carried risk, that the walls had ears and hearts could betray. And yet we could not stop. It was intoxicating, a game of desire and restraint, of knowing smiles and unspoken confessions, a delicate and dangerous balance that made every interaction unforgettable. Some days, the tension became almost unbearable. I would sit at my desk, pretending to work, my mind replaying every subtle gesture from his previous visit. The way he had tilted his head, the faint smirk he couldn't quite hide, the brush of his hand against mine as he pretended to hand me something. My pulse would race, my thoughts scattered, and I would catch myself imagining scenarios that I knew I could never act on, fantasies that hovered just at the edge of taboo, feeding the secret thrill of attraction and the shame of desire. And it wasn't just physical. There was something in the way he looked at me, a kind of recognition, a kind of understanding that made me feel seen in a way my husband's brief touches could never achieve. He understood my body, my hesitations, my secret cravings, and he knew, somehow, exactly how to make my pulse quicken with nothing more than a look. It was maddening, exhilarating, and utterly consuming. I found myself anticipating each encounter with a mix of excitement and guilt that was almost painful. By the way, if you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit subscribe. Trust me, the rest of these secret moments are even more intense, and you won't want to miss it. Even after all these stolen interactions, the guilt never fully left me. I loved my husband in my own way, appreciated his kindness, and respected the life we had built. But the void left by his inability to satisfy me at night lingered, and Ratan's presence filled it in a way that was as dangerous as it was addictive. Each time he left my room, I would feel a mixture of longing, shame, and an undeniable thrill, knowing that we had created a secret world that existed just outside my husband's perception. A world where desire and restraint coexisted in a delicate, almost unbearable tension. Over time, these encounters became the rhythm of my days. A whispered conversation in the kitchen, a shared glance across the living room, the way he lingered at my door when my husband was away. Each interaction a delicate balance of flirtation, restraint, and unspoken understanding. And I memorized it all. Every expression, every gesture, every subtle flicker of emotion, as though preparing for a story I would one day tell, a confession I would one day make, a memory I could never forget. After weeks of stolen glances and subtle touches, things slowly escalated. It started with small, seemingly accidental brushes. A hand lingering just a moment too long as he passed something to me. A shoulder bump that left my heart racing. The rush of adrenaline that made my thoughts scatter. And yet, each of these little interactions carried an electricity that I could feel deep in my chest. I began to anticipate these visits, timing my day around the moments when my husband would be away at work, my mind already racing with fantasies I never dared put into words. One afternoon, he leaned against my doorframe as I organized some papers, a faint smirk playing on his lips. I couldn't help it. My pulse quickened, and I felt the warmth in my body that only he seemed to awaken. The air between us felt charged, like a storm ready to break, and for the first time, I felt the desire to let it happen, to see how far we could go. The first physical moment arrived almost hesitantly, a hand on my waist as he leaned in to whisper a joke, a brush of lips that was meant to be playful but sent shivers down my spine. I remember it vividly, the way my stomach twisted, the heat rushing through me, the rush of adrenaline that made my thoughts scatter. It felt dangerous, exciting, utterly consuming. I couldn't help but notice how perfect he was. The result of hours in the gym reflected in the strength of his arms, the tone of his body, the smooth control in his movements. Every touch, every movement was precise, calculated yet natural, and I felt myself melting under his attention. His timing was impeccable. He seemed to know exactly how to prolong the moments, to keep the tension alive without letting it break, every motion leaving me gasping for more. I caught myself imagining what it would be like if these moments never stopped, if he never pulled away, if we could simply exist in this stolen world we had created. It was intoxicating, a cocktail of desire, guilt, and thrill that I had never known before marriage. The encounters grew bolder over time. A hand would rest lightly on my shoulder as he leaned over my desk, a whispered comment that brushed my ear, a subtle press against me as we moved around the room. And I reveled in it. The thrill of knowing we were dancing on the edge of something forbidden, the excitement of sharing moments that my husband could never know. I would lie awake afterward, heart racing, mind replaying every detail. The brush of his hand, the curve of his smile, the way his body felt pressed just close enough to ignite every nerve. Ending. I began to understand why people called forbidden desire so addictive. It wasn't just the attraction. It was the secrecy, the danger, the knowledge that every second was ours alone. Even now, thinking back, I can feel the rush, the excitement, the heady mix of thrill and guilt. I remember every subtle brush of his fingers, the way his timing was flawless, how he seemed to know exactly how to make me tremble with anticipation. His body, honed from the gym, perfect and strong, was a marvel, and being near him was like standing on the edge of a cliff with a storm at your back. Terrifying, exhilarating, and unforgettable. And I confess, with a mixture of shame and thrill, that I never wanted him to stop, never wanted the moments to end, and never wanted to lose that feeling that made me so alive, so present, so aware of every pulse, every breath, every delicious second. By the end of it, I realized these moments were teaching me more about myself than I could have imagined. About desire, about attention, about the power of subtle intimacy, about how alive a person can feel when every nerve ending seems on fire. Even now, as I remember all of it, I know the story isn't over. There are moments yet to come, choices yet to be made, and secrets that will continue to shape what happens next.